The funeral home in Akron smelled like lilies and lemon polish. I stood at a small reception desk near the side door, signing a release form on a clipboard, and my son stood at my hip with his hand inside mine. And on the desk in front of me, there was one cardboard box about the size of a shoebox, taped along the seam with a single strip of beige packing tape, and a small white envelope on top of it with my name written in blue ballpoint pen. The funeral director was a soft, slow-spoken man in his 60s named Mr. Ellsworth, and he had been kind to me all morning, and now he stood at the other side of the desk with his hands folded in front of him and waited for me to finish signing. "That's everything she had with her, Mrs. Halloway," he said gently. "The envelope is the inventory list. There's $400 in cash inside the box, 2 pearl earrings, a wristwatch, and some folded clothing. I had them sealed in the box together so nothing would shift." "Thank you," I said. "She was a quiet woman," he said. "She made all her own arrangements. There's nothing left to do." I nodded. My son's hand tightened on mine, but he did not look up. He had been composed all morning in a way that frightened me a little. He had stood at the back of the chapel during the short service in his small navy blazer and his small clip-on tie, and he had not cried, not once, and when the minister had asked if anyone wanted to speak, my son had simply shaken his head once and tipped his face very slightly toward the floor. I signed the release form. Mr. Ellsworth slid the clipboard back across the desk and laid one soft hand briefly over mine. "You take care now," he said. I picked up the cardboard box. It was lighter than I had expected. I walked out of the funeral home holding the box against my chest with one arm and holding my son's hand with the other, and the October air outside was sharp and bright, and the leaves on the maples down the block were the color of rust, and my son walked beside me on the pavement and did not say a word until we reached the car. "Mom," he said while I was buckling him in, "is that Grandma?" "That's Grandma's things, baby," I said. He looked at the box on the passenger seat for a long second. "Are you going to open it?" "Not yet," I said. "I'll open it when I'm ready." He nodded once like a small adult and did not ask again. I drove us home to the rental on Kenmore Avenue with the box on the passenger seat, and I carried the box inside and I set it on the kitchen counter beside the toaster, and I did not open it. I did not open it that night, and I did not open it the next day, and I did not open it the day after that. I poured my son his cereal in the morning, and I drove him to school, and I worked my shifts at the hospital admissions desk. And I picked him up, and I made dinner, and I put him to bed. And the cardboard box sat on the kitchen counter beside the toaster, taped, untouched, the small white envelope still on top of it with my name written in blue ballpoint pen. For 9 days, I lived around it like it was a piece of furniture. On the 7th day, my son walked into the kitchen with his book bag, stopped beside the counter, looked at the box, and looked up at me. "Mom," he said, "why is it still on the counter?" "Because I'm not ready, baby." "Are you scared?" "A little." "Do you want me to open it?" "No, baby. That's something I have to do by myself." He nodded, the way he had nodded at the funeral home. He set his book bag on the floor. He climbed up onto the kitchen chair across from where the box sat. He leaned his elbows on the counter and he rested his chin on his fists, and he looked at the box, and after a long moment, he said very quietly, "It's not going anywhere, Mom. We can wait." I do not know whether he meant the box or my mother. I do not think he knew either. He climbed down off the chair after a while, picked up his book bag, and went to do his homework. My mother's name was Dorothy. She had raised me alone in Akron from the time I was an infant. She had worked as a bookkeeper for a small carpet warehouse on East Market Street for 31 years. She had lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner on Copley Road for the last 22 of those years. She had never had a man in her life that I knew of. Never had a friend who came over for coffee. Never spoke about her own mother or her own father or where in the world she had come from before Akron. I'd asked her once when I was about 10 on a long drive home from a fall festival in a state park, Mom, where did you grow up? A long way from here, baby. Like California. No, baby. Like Florida? No. Then where? A long way from here. Did you have brothers or sisters? No, baby. Did you have a mom? Everybody has a mom, baby. Was she nice? She had been quiet for a long time. The trees had gone past the windows in long strips of red and orange. I don't want to talk about it tonight, baby. Tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. Promise? I'll do my best, baby. Now lean back and try to sleep. We've got a long way to go. She had turned the radio up. I had not asked her again. Not the next day, not ever. She had been kind to me. She had been kind to my son, in the careful, distant way that some grandmothers are. She had come to his birthdays. She had brought him a hand-knit gray wool sweater every winter. She had baked him exactly one batch of oatmeal raisin cookies a year, on his first day of school. And when she had been diagnosed in August with the pancreatic cancer that took her in October, she had not told me until the third week of September. "I didn't want to spoil your summer," she had said, sitting in the recliner in her tiny apartment with her hands folded over a heating pad on her stomach. "Mom," I had said. "Mom, how long have you known?" "Since the second week of August." 6 weeks. You've known for 6 weeks. Don't fuss. You should have told me. I've made all my arrangements. There's nothing for you to do. Mom, don't fuss, I said. I'm tired, baby. What can I do? Nothing. There's nothing to do. Make me a cup of tea. Mom, make me a cup of tea, baby. 2 sugars. The way I like it. I had made her the tea. I had brought it to her in the green ceramic mug she had owned my entire life. She had taken it in both hands. She had not looked at me for a long minute. Mom, I had said, is there anyone you want me to call? No, baby. Anyone at all? No. Family? No? From anywhere? No, baby, there's no one. Don't fuss. That phrase. The same phrase Mr. Ellsworth had used at the funeral home. There's nothing left to do, as though she had spent her last weeks methodically subtracting herself from every list she had ever been on, leaving only the bare minimum behind for me, only the box. On the 9th night after the funeral, I put my son to bed at 8:30. I read him 2 chapters of a book about a boy who finds a baby dragon under a hedge. I kissed him on the forehead. I turned off his lamp. He pulled the small gray stuffed elephant up under his chin and he closed his eyes, and I stood in his doorway for a long minute and watched him breathe. Then I went out to the kitchen and I sat down at the small wooden kitchen table by the window, and I pulled the cardboard box across the counter to me, and I switched on the warm yellow lamp on the table, and I peeled the beige packing tape off the seam in one long, careful strip, and I lifted the flap. Inside, on top, was a single gray wool cardigan, folded with the sleeves in. I lifted it out. Underneath it was a smaller gray wool sweater, also folded. Underneath that, 2 pearl earrings in a small clear plastic bag. A man's silver wristwatch with a cracked leather strap, which I had never seen her wear, which must have been her father's, or some man who had been before me, before Akron. $400 in cash, in 20s, paper clipped together. And underneath all of that, lying flat against the bottom of the box, was a long, pale yellow envelope, the kind that legal documents come in, and across the front of it, in my mother's small, neat, slightly slanted handwriting, in blue ballpoint pen, were 2 words. Property. Deed. I lifted the envelope out. I set it on the table beside the lamp. I did not open it. I sat very still for a moment with my hands flat on the wood on either side of the envelope, and then I stood up, and I walked across the kitchen, and I unlocked the back door, and I stepped out onto the small concrete stoop in my socks, and I stood there in the cold October air, looking out into the dark backyard of the rental, where the chain-link fence ran along the alley and a single neighbor's porch light made a yellow square on the gravel. And I stood there for I do not know how long. 3 minutes. 5. The cold went through my socks into the bones of my feet. I stood there, and I did not cry, and I did not think anything in words. I just stood at the back door of the rental I had been renting for 4 years, and I looked out at the dark. If this story is finding you tonight, take a moment to press the like button below. It helps these stories find the mothers who need them. When I came back inside, I locked the door behind me. I sat back down at the kitchen table. I picked up the long, pale yellow envelope. I opened it. There were 3 documents inside. The first was a property deed for a 4-bedroom brownstone at a Park Slope address in Brooklyn, recorded with the City of New York on March 14, 1996. Sale price $61,000. Purchaser listed as Dorothy Margaret Vanstone, my mother's maiden name, a name I had not known she had ever used, a name I had only seen once, on the back of a photograph when I was 12. The second was a property management agreement with a Brooklyn firm called Carroll Gardens Property Services, dated the same week, authorizing them to collect rent on the property and deposit it into a Brooklyn savings account in my mother's maiden name. The third was a bank statement from that same Brooklyn savings account, dated September 30th, 2024, 3 weeks before my mother's death, showing a balance of $1,203,486, the result of 28 years of monthly rent deposits at a current rate of $4,200 a month, plus interest, untouched, never withdrawn, accumulating quietly month after month for 28 years. Underneath the 3 documents was a sealed white letter envelope with my name on the front in my mother's small, neat, slightly slanted handwriting. I did not open the letter that night. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, looking at the deed in the lamplight. The address on it was a number and a street name in a neighborhood in Brooklyn that I had never been to in my life. My mother had bought the house in March of 1996. I had been 7 years old in March of 1996. My son's age, exactly. I had been in 2nd grade at McKinley Elementary in Akron in a brown corduroy jumper learning long division. And on the other side of the country, my mother had walked into a New York City auction room and paid $61,000 in cash for a brownstone, in a name she did not use anymore, in a neighborhood I had never heard her mention. The next morning was a Saturday. My son came into the kitchen at 7 in his pale blue dinosaur pajamas, his hair sticking up on one side. He climbed up onto the chair across from me. The cardboard box was still on the table. The yellow envelope was still on the table. The deed was on top of the envelope, folded once. He looked at the deed. He looked at me. He looked at the deed again. "Is it our house?" he said. I did not answer right away. I sat there and I looked at him across the table, at his careful, serious 7-year-old face, and I tried to think of how to explain to him what I had not yet explained to myself. "I don't know yet, baby," I said finally. "I think it might be." "Where is it?" "Brooklyn," I said. "In New York." "That's far." "Yes." He nodded. He picked up his spoon, and he ate 3 bites of cereal in silence. Then he said, very quietly into his bowl, "Did Grandma know about it?" "Grandma bought it," I said. "When?" "A long time ago. Before you were born. Before I was a grown-up." He chewed. He swallowed. He thought about it for a while. Then he said, "Why didn't she tell us?" "I don't know yet, baby." "Are you going to find out?" "Yes." "Today?" "No," I said. "But soon. Next weekend we'll drive there." "Both of us?" "Both of us." "Okay," he said, and he ate the rest of his cereal. I called Carroll Gardens Property Services on Monday morning from my desk in the admissions office at the hospital on my 15-minute break. The woman who answered the phone was named Mrs. Pellegrino. "Carroll Gardens, this is Joan." "Mrs. Pellegrino?" "Yes." "My name is Sarah Halloway. I'm Dorothy Vanstone's daughter." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Oh, Mrs. Pellegrino said finally. Oh dear. Is your mother... She passed in October. Oh, honey. Yes. Oh, I am so sorry. I am so very sorry. Thank you. We knew she was unwell. She wrote to us in August. She told us what would need to happen. Honey, do you have the deed? I have the deed. Good, good. That's the first thing. That's the most important thing. Are you sitting down? I'm at my desk. All right, listen to me carefully. We have a sealed instruction packet here for you, from your mother. A what? A sealed packet. She left it with us in early September, in a brown manila envelope, sealed with red sealing wax. She told us not to open it. She told us just to give it to you when you came. Are you coming to Brooklyn? I'm coming on Saturday. This Saturday? Yes. Honey, listen to me. Bring the deed. Bring photo identification. Bring your birth certificate if you have it. Bring your son. Are you bringing your son? How did you know about my son? Honey, your mother talked about that boy every quarter when she called. Every quarter like clockwork, the day after the rent cleared. She wanted to know how the leaves were on the block, she wanted to know how my arthritis was, and then she wanted to know about your boy. By name. What? By name, honey, every time. The tenant in the building has been there for 22 years. Her name is Mrs. Adelaide Quinn. She's a retired school teacher. She's a wonderful woman. Your mother loved her dearly in her own quiet way. Did she love me? Honey, listen to me. Did she? There is a photograph of you on her file from when you were maybe 8, in a brown corduroy jumper. Your 2 front teeth missing. She put it there in 1996. She has not let us replace the file folder in 28 years because she did not want the photograph to leave the cabinet. So when you ask me, did your mother love you? Yes, honey, yes. I could not speak. Honey, yes. Drive safe on Saturday. I will. And honey, yes. Welcome home. I sat at my admissions desk for a long time after I hung up the phone, with my hand still resting on the receiver, and the woman in the chair across from me, a young mother in her 20s with a baby on her shoulder, waiting to register the baby for an outpatient procedure, said very softly, "Are you all right, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "Yes, I'm sorry, I'm fine. Let's get this paperwork started for you." I clocked out at 6. I picked my son up at the YMCA, and on the drive home he asked, "Did you call the lady?" I called the lady, baby. What did she say? She said she's been waiting for us. She said the lady who lives in the house already knows what happened. She's a nice lady, baby. She's a retired school teacher. Like Mrs. Eckhart. Yes, like Mrs. Eckhart. He thought about this for a long block of red tail lights moving slowly down North Hawkins. "Mom," he said. "Yes, baby." "Is Grandma's house going to be our house?" "I think it is, baby." "Is that allowed?" "I think so. We're going to find out on Saturday." "Okay," he said. And then, after another block, "Mom?" "Yes, baby." "I won't be scared?" I had to pull the car over under the maples on West Market Street. "Mom," he said after a moment. "Yes, baby." "Are you crying?" "Just a little, baby." "Is it bad crying or good crying?" "I don't know yet, baby." "Okay," he said. "Take your time." That Saturday morning, I packed an overnight bag for my son and a small canvas tote for myself, and I put the cardboard box in the trunk of the car, with the deed and the unopened white letter inside it, and we drove east. We drove from Akron through the long Pennsylvania mountains, and we stopped for grilled cheese in a diner outside of Stroudsburg, and we crossed the George Washington Bridge in late afternoon light with the Hudson burning gold underneath us, and my son sat very still in the back seat with his small gray stuffed elephant on his lap, and he watched the city come up around us with his mouth slightly open. "Are we there?" he said when we crossed the bridge. "Almost," I said. We got off the bridge, and we worked our way south through Manhattan and across the Brooklyn Bridge in the slow Saturday traffic, and the sun was sliding low and orange across the rooftops by the time we turned into the tree-lined street in Park Slope where the Brownstone stood. The plane trees on the block were old and thick and going gold, and the leaves were down across the wet sidewalk, and the row of brownstones stretched away from us on both sides of the street like something in a painting. And I parked the car at the curb in front of number 247, and I sat in the driver's seat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. "Mom," my son said from the back seat, "is this it?" "This is it," I said. We got out of the car. I held my son's hand. We stood on the wet pavement together in the gold, late-afternoon light, and we looked up at the brownstone. It was 4 stories of red-brown stone, with tall single-pane bay windows on the parlor floor, wrought-iron railings on the stoop, a leaded glass front door at the top of 7 worn stone steps. There was a small brass plaque beside the doorbell, but I could not read it from the street. "It's tall," my son said. "It is." "Is it really ours?" "Let's go find out, baby." We went up the stoop. The autumn leaves crackled under our shoes. I rang the bell. From inside the house, I heard slow, careful footsteps coming down a long hallway, and then the leaded glass front door opened, and a small, upright woman in her early 70s stood in the doorway, in a soft, pale blue lambswool cardigan over a cream blouse, with neat silver hair pulled back into a low chignon, and kind gray-blue eyes behind silver wire-rimmed glasses. And she looked at me, and she put one hand to her mouth, and her eyes filled with tears. "Oh, my dear," she said. "Oh, you have her cheekbones. You have her exact cheekbones. Come in, both of you. Please come in." She stepped back and held the door open. I led my son inside. The hallway smelled faintly of old wood and bergamot tea. The ceilings were 12 feet high. The floors were original parquet, polished and dark. There was a coat rack to the right with a single soft camel coat hanging on it, and a small mahogany hall table with a vase of yellow chrysanthemums. "My name is Adelaide Quinn," she said, closing the door behind us. "I have lived in the lower duplex of this house for 22 years. Your mother, God bless her, was the kindest landlady in the borough. I'm so sorry for your loss, my dear. Please, come back to the kitchen. I have tea on." "Thank you," I said. "This is my son." "Hello, young man," Mrs. Quinn said, bending down a little. "What a brave face you have." "Hello," my son said. She led us down the long hallway to a small, warm kitchen at the back of the parlor floor, with a window that looked out onto a tiny brick garden, and she sat us down at a round oak table, and she poured tea from a brown earthenware pot, and she set a plate of shortbread cookies in front of my son, and she sat down across from me, and she folded her hands. "I have something to tell you," she said, "and then I will leave you alone in the upper floors, because that is what your mother asked me to do." "All right," I said. "Your mother bought this house in March of 1996, she said. She paid $61,000 for it at a city tax default auction. That was the entire amount of a small inheritance she had received 3 weeks earlier from her own grandmother, a woman named Eleanor Vanstone, who had lived in this house from 1958 until her death." "Your mother grew up in this house, my dear. Did she ever tell you that?" "No," I said. "She never told me anything." Mrs. Quinn nodded slowly as though she had expected this answer. "Did she ever speak about Brooklyn at all?" "No." "About her grandmother?" "No, ma'am." "About Eleanor?" "No." "About the rupture?" "What rupture?" "Oh, my dear. Mrs. Quinn, tell me." "There was a rupture in the family, my dear. In the spring of 1987. Your mother was 22. You were 8 weeks old. And? She left this house with you in her arms and a suitcase in her other hand, and she swore she would never come back." "I do not know all of what happened, my dear. Your mother never told me, but I know she left, and I know she went to Ohio, and I know she did not return for 37 years. Not even, not even when her grandmother died, not even when the house came to her. She bought it through an attorney and a property manager. She never set foot inside it again. Why did she buy it? Mrs. Quinn was quiet for a moment. She looked down at her hands on the oak table. I think, she said carefully, she bought it for you. For me. For you, my dear. I think she could not come back herself, but she could not bear the thought of the house going to a stranger. So, she bought it, and she rented it to me. I'd been her grandmother's lodger for the last 6 years of Eleanor's life. I knew this house very well, and she let it sit, and she let the rent accumulate. For 28 years? For 28 years, my dear. She waited for a day she could find a way to bring you home, and I do not think she ever found that day. I do not think she ever knew how. Why not? Your mother was a very proud woman, my dear, and a very wounded one. The two together do not make for an easy phone call. I did not say anything. I held my teacup in both hands, and I looked down at the surface of the tea. Your mother wrote to me 3 weeks before she died, my dear. She wrote to you. Yes. What did she say? She said she had written to you. What else? She said you would come. How did she know I would come? My dear, she knew her own daughter. She did not. She did, in the only way she could let herself. I was quiet for a long moment. What else did she ask of you, Mrs. Quinn? To give you the keys, to tell you what I have just told you, and then to leave you alone in the upper floors with your boy, for as long as you needed, so you could see the rooms she had grown up in, before she left them, and before she could not come back. That's what she said. That's what she said, my dear. May I take you upstairs now? Yes, I said, please. She stood up. She took a small brass key off a hook beside the kitchen door, and she handed it to me, and she folded my fingers gently around it. The door at the top of the parlor stairs goes to the upper duplex, she said. It has been empty for 28 years. I have had a cleaner go through it twice a year. The furniture is under sheets. The water and the lights still work. Take your time, my dear. There is no hurry. There is no hurry at all. I took my son's hand. We went out of the kitchen, and down the hallway, and up the wide parlor stairs, and at the top of the stairs there was a single white-painted door, and I unlocked it with the small brass key, and I pushed it open. The light inside was gold and dim. The afternoon sun came through the tall bay windows of the parlor in long shafts, and the dust hung in the shafts like slow snow, and the furniture was all under white cotton sheets, a long sofa, 2 armchairs, a low table, a piano against the far wall. And the floors were dark hardwood, and the walls were faded cream. And there was a marble fireplace at one end of the room, and on the mantel, alone, was a single, small, framed sepia photograph. I walked across the parlor floor with my son holding my hand, and the boards creaked under our shoes, and we stood in front of the mantel, and I picked up the photograph. It was a photograph from 1987. A young woman of 22 with dark wavy hair to her shoulders, in a 1980s denim jacket standing on a stoop I now recognized as the stoop of this house, holding an 8-week-old infant in a white blanket. The young woman's eyes were soft gray blue. I had inherited those eyes. So had my son. I sat down on the floor. The dust on the hardwood was fine and pale. I sat down on it cross-legged in my dark blue jeans, and I held the photograph in both hands, and my son sat down beside me very slowly, and he leaned against my shoulder, and he did not say anything for a long while. A man in a navy windbreaker came up the stairs about 15 minutes later. He was the building inspector that Mrs. Pellegrino had arranged for me, a quiet man in his 50s with a clipboard, and he walked through the upper duplex room by room with a small flashlight and a moisture meter, and after about an hour he came back into the parlor where I was still sitting on the floor with my son, and he crouched down on his heels in front of us, and he set the clipboard on the floor. "Ma'am," he said, "I have to tell you, the title is clean. I just had it pulled from the borough registry on my phone. The deed transferred to you the day your mother passed. She had it set up that way through her attorney. The structural condition is excellent. The roof was replaced in 2014. The boiler was replaced in 2019. Comparable sales on this block in the last 12 months put the current market value of this building at $2.4 million. $2.4 million, I repeated quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you," I said. "There is one more thing, ma'am," he said. He looked down at his clipboard, then back up at me. "I do not usually say this on a job, but I have been doing inspections in this borough for 26 years. I have walked through hundreds of these houses. This one was kept. Whoever was paying the bills cared. The pipes are bled. The boiler has a maintenance log on a clipboard in the basement going back to 2002. The roof was not just replaced, ma'am. It was replaced with copper flashing. Somebody loved this building from a long way away." "My mother," I said. "I figured," he said. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am." He nodded once. He picked up his clipboard. He stood up and he walked back down the stairs, and I heard him say something kind to Mrs. Quinn at the bottom, and I heard the front door close behind him. I looked at my son. He was sitting on the dusty hardwood beside me with his knees pulled up, looking at me, waiting. The gray stuffed elephant was on his lap. The light from the bay windows was on the side of his face. "Baby," I said, "I have to tell you something." "Okay," he said. "You had a grandmother, my mom. You knew her. You called her Grandma Dorothy. I remember. But before she was Grandma Dorothy, she was a young woman in this house. She was 22 years old. She had me when she was 22, and she lived right here, in this house, with her grandmother, who was your great-great-grandmother. And something happened in the family. I don't know all of what happened. But she left, and she took me with her, and she went to Ohio, and she never came back. Not once, not for 37 years. Why? I don't know yet, baby. There's a letter she wrote me. I'm going to read it tonight, after you're asleep." "Was she sad?" "I think she was sad," I said. "I think she was sad for a very long time." "Did she love you?" "Yes." "Did she love me?" "Yes, baby. Very much." He looked around the parlor. He looked at the white-sheeted sofa and the white-sheeted armchairs and the marble fireplace and the tall bay windows. He looked up at the high ceilings. He looked at the dust hanging in the gold light. Then he stood up. He walked across the parlor floor on his sock feet, and he went to the bay window. And he reached up with one small finger, and on the inside of the dusty glass he wrote, very carefully, very slowly, 4 letters. D-O-T-T. He turned around and looked at me. "Was that her name?" he said. I could not speak for a moment. "Yes, baby," I finally said. "That's what they called her when she was little. Her grandmother called her Dottie. It's in the letter. Mrs. Quinn told me on the way up the stairs. That was her name in this house." He nodded once. Then he came back across the parlor floor, and he sat down beside me on the dusty hardwood again, and he leaned his head against my shoulder, and we did not say anything else for a long time. That night, after Mrs. Quinn made us a small supper of roast chicken and buttered carrots in her kitchen, and after she insisted we stay in the spare guest bed in her duplex rather than try to sleep in the dust upstairs, and after I had tucked my son in and read him one chapter of the Dragon Book from the overnight bag, I went out and sat at Mrs. Quinn's oak table in the kitchen with the small lamp on, and I opened the white envelope my mother had left inside the deed. The letter was 3 pages long, in my mother's small, neat handwriting, on cream stationery. It was dated September 28th, 2024, 3 weeks before her death. It began, "To my daughter, who I should have brought back." I am not going to repeat the whole letter here. I do not think I could. but I will tell you what was in it. She wrote it to me, line by line, in her own voice. I grew up in this house from the time I was 4 years old, she wrote. I was raised mostly by my grandmother Eleanor because my own mother, your grandmother, a woman I never let you hear named, was a difficult and sometimes cruel woman who drank too much and said unforgivable things. In the winter of 1986, I became pregnant with you at the age of 21 by a young man who left for California 3 months in. I gave birth to you in February of 1987 in a hospital here in Brooklyn. And for 6 weeks after you were born, I tried to make it work in this house with Grandma Eleanor and with my own mother, who lived 2 blocks away. She told me that on a Tuesday morning in late April of 1987 when I was 8 weeks old. Her own mother had stood in the parlor of the Brownstone and had called her a word my mother would not write on the page. And she had told her the way only a mother can tell a daughter. The things you can never take back. Get out, her own mother had said. Where do you want me to go? My mother had said. Anywhere, I do not care. Get out of my house and take that baby with you. This is not your house. This is Grandma's house. Get out. I have nowhere to go. That is not my problem anymore. It stopped being my problem the day you brought a bastard home. That is what my mother wrote on the page. The exact words. In her small, neat, slanted blue ballpoint hand, on cream stationery, in a 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner in Akron, Ohio, 3 weeks before she died. She had walked out of the house that afternoon with me in her arms and a suitcase in her other hand, and she had taken a Greyhound bus to Akron, Ohio, where a college friend had offered her a room in a basement, and she had sworn on the bus, somewhere in western Pennsylvania, that she would never set foot in the city of New York for the rest of her life. I kept that promise, she wrote. Even when Grandma Eleanor died in February of 1996, I did not go to the funeral. I grieved alone in my apartment in Akron, with a 7-year-old you asleep in the next room, and I did not tell you that anyone had died. I'm sorry for that. I am sorry for so many things. 3 weeks after Eleanor's death, the attorney for the estate reached me by phone, she wrote. There was an inheritance. $73,000 in cash, in a savings account, in Grandma's name. She had left it specifically, and only to me, with a single line of instruction. He read it to me on the phone. He said, "For Dottie to come home with." I had to ask him to read it twice. I had to ask him a 3rd time before I could understand it. I sat down on the floor of the kitchen with the phone cord stretched. I did not say anything to him for a long time. He waited. He was a kind man. I could not come home, she wrote. I could not. I had said the word never on a Greyhound bus in 1987, and I could not unsay it. But I could not let the house go either. The house was the only place in the world I had ever felt safe as a child. I could not bear the thought of a stranger living in the kitchen where Grandma had taught me to make biscuits. I sat with that sentence for many nights. Many nights, baby. She told me that in March of 1996 she had read in the Brooklyn paper that the house had gone into city tax default, because her own mother, who had inherited the house from Eleanor in some prior arrangement my mother did not fully understand, had let the property taxes lapse for 3 consecutive years and had then died of cirrhosis in a Bronx hospital, alone, 4 months after Eleanor. The house was going to public auction. The reserve price was set at the unpaid tax balance, $61,000. She had wired the $73,000 to a Brooklyn attorney. She had instructed him to bid up to the full amount. She had won the house at the reserve. She had paid in cash. She had registered it in her maiden name, Dorothy Margaret Vanstone, a name she had not used since 1987 and would never use again. She had hired Mrs. Pellegrino's firm. She had rented the lower duplex to Mrs. Quinn, who had been Eleanor's lodger for the last 6 years, at a kindly rate, and she had let the upper duplex sit empty, under sheets, for 28 years. She had let the rent accumulate in the Brooklyn savings account in her maiden name. She had never withdrawn a single dollar of it. She had never set foot in the building she owned. "I thought every year for 28 years that I might tell you," she wrote, "that I might bring you, that I might break the promise I made on a Greyhound bus in 1987. And every year I did not. The shame became its own kind of debt, baby. The longer I did not tell you, the harder it became to tell you. I am ashamed of that. I want you to know I am ashamed." In late August of 2024, I sat in a Cleveland Clinic exam room with a folder of scans in my lap, she wrote. I asked the doctor how long. He said, "It is hard to be precise, Mrs. Holloway." I said, "Please try." He said, "Weeks." He said, "I am very sorry." I drove home. I sat at my kitchen table. I decided the only honest thing left for me to do was to leave the keys in a box, and the deed in an envelope, and a letter that did not lie. And to hope, baby, to hope you would be a kinder mother to your boy than my mother was to me. And to hope you would bring him to the house I could not bring myself back to. She closed the letter with a single line. "Tell him I loved him. Tell him I wish I had been brave enough to say it out loud. Bring him home." I sat at Mrs. Quinn's kitchen table for a long time with the letter folded in front of me. I did not cry. Then I did. Then I stopped. Then I cried again. The tea cooled in the brown earthenware pot. My son slept in the spare bed in the next room with the gray stuffed elephant tucked under his chin. We stayed in Brooklyn for the rest of that weekend. On Sunday morning, Mrs. Quinn made us pancakes in her kitchen, and my son ate 4 of them, and she laughed for the first time since I had met her. And her laugh was high and soft and surprising, and my son grinned at her with maple syrup on his chin. After breakfast, she walked us through the upper duplex room by room with a notebook and a pen, and she told us what she remembered of each room from the years when my mother had been a child in it. "This was Dottie's room," she said, pushing open a door at the back of the second floor. "I remember from when I was a young woman, and I would come to dinner with Eleanor. There was a yellow rug on the floor and a small white bookcase by the window. She had a stuffed rabbit. She read constantly." My son walked into the empty bedroom. He stood in the middle of the dusty floor. "Mom." "Yes, baby? Can this be my room? Are you sure?" "I'm sure. It's a long way from your old room, baby." "I know. You'll have to leave a lot behind." "I know, Mom." "You're sure?" "I want to sleep where she slept," he said. "Why, baby?" He thought about it for a long moment. He scrunched his small face up the way he did when he was trying to find the exact right word for something. And then he looked at me with his serious hazel eyes and he said, "Because then she won't have slept here alone." I could not answer him. I just put my arms around him and I held him on the dusty hardwood, and he let me. And Mrs. Quinn, who had been watching from the doorway with her notebook in her hand, quietly stepped back into the hallway and gave us a moment, and her footsteps went softly down the parlor stairs. That afternoon, Mrs. Quinn took us for a walk around the block. She showed my son the small brick library 3 streets over where his great-great-grandmother Eleanor had volunteered every Tuesday afternoon for 40 years. She showed him the corner bakery where Eleanor had bought a loaf of seeded rye every Saturday morning. She showed him the small church at the end of the avenue where Eleanor was buried in the side yard. "Would you like to go in, my dears?" Mrs. Quinn asked at the iron gate. "Yes, please," I said. We walked together along a narrow gravel path between old slate stones, and Mrs. Quinn led us to a small gray marker under a thin maple tree with the name Eleanor Mary Vanstone, 1916 to 1996, carved in plain letters, and below it, in smaller letters, a kind woman who raised a kind child. My son knelt down in the cold grass beside the marker. He set his small gray stuffed elephant against the base of the stone for a moment, the way a child might leave a flower. Then he picked the elephant back up and tucked it under his arm. "Mom, he said. Was she a good grandma? To my mom, yes, I think so, baby. Then I like her, he said. That night, after the long phone call I made from Mrs. Gwynn's hallway to my supervisor at the hospital, asking for the Monday off, and the longer call I made to my best friend Marisol in Akron, who had watched my son 1,000 afternoons over the last 4 years, and who had sat with me in the chapel 3 weeks earlier in a black sweater she had borrowed from her sister. I sat at Mrs. Quinn's kitchen table again, with the letter folded in front of me, and I read it for the second time, slower now, line by line. I read the part where my mother described the kitchen, the blue and white tiles above the sink, the yellow wallpaper, the smell of biscuits in the morning, the way her grandmother had hummed while she worked. I had grown up in an apartment kitchen with a beige laminate counter and a cracked vinyl floor. I had not known there had ever been a kitchen with blue and white tiles in my mother's life. I had not known there had ever been a humming. I went back upstairs in my socks. I crossed the parlor floor in the dark. I found the wall switch by feel. I turned on a single small lamp on a side table, the only lamp in the upper duplex that had a bulb still working in it, and the lamp threw a soft yellow circle on the dusty floor. I walked into the kitchen at the back of the upper duplex. The tiles above the sink were blue and white. The wallpaper, faded almost to gray, had been yellow ones. I stood there for a moment in the dark, in my socks, in a kitchen where a woman I had never met had once hummed while she rolled out biscuit dough, and I told her, out loud, very quietly, "Hello, Eleanor. We came home." We drove back to Akron on Sunday night with my son asleep in the back seat. Over the next 4 months, I gave notice at the rental, transferred my son's records to a Park Slope school, gave 4 weeks' notice at the hospital, and packed our small life into a U-Haul. We drove back in early March. We moved into the upper duplex of 247 Park Slope, into the rooms that had been my mother's. We made them ours, slowly, with second-hand furniture and bookshelves we built together on Saturdays. "Mom," my son said, the morning we hung the first picture. "Yes, baby." "It feels like she's here. Does it, baby? A little, in a good way?" "Good." I sat with Mrs. Quinn at her oak kitchen table on the morning we moved in. She had set out a brown earthenware pot of tea and a plate of shortbread, and her hands were folded carefully on the wood. "Mrs. Quinn," I said, "I want to talk to you about your rent." "Oh," she said. "Oh dear, of course I knew this would come. I have been a tenant a long time, my dear. I understand. The market is what it is. I will look at apartments today and Mrs. Quinn?" "Yes?" "I am cutting it in half." She was quiet. She looked at me for a long moment over the rim of her wire glasses. "My dear," she said, "you cannot—" "I can. It is far below market. You will lose. I am not losing anything, Mrs. Quinn. My mother loved you. She loved you in the careful, patient way that only a long-time tenant can love a landlady who never came to visit. You were her only Brooklyn family for 22 years, the only one. She would never let me raise it on you. So I am lowering it instead. My dear, it is not negotiable, Mrs. Quinn." She put her small hand over her mouth. Her eyes filled behind her wire glasses. "My dear," she said very softly, "your mother would be proud of you." "I hope so," I said. "She would," Mrs. Quinn said. "She would. She is." I had the brass plaque beside the doorbell replaced. I had it engraved with the same name that was on the deed. Brownstone. My mother's maiden name. The name she had left behind on a Greyhound bus in 1987. The name she had quietly carried back to this stoop in 1996 and then never used again. The name that was still mine to claim. I put the small framed sepia photograph back on the mantel in the parlor. I dusted the glass. The young woman in the denim jacket is still standing on the stoop, holding the 8-week-old infant in the white blanket, with her soft, gray-blue eyes looking past the camera toward something none of us can see. Tonight, 1 year on, my son is 7.5. He is in second grade at PS 321. He has 2 friends from his class, a girl and a boy, and they come over on Saturdays and run up and down the parlor stairs in their sock feet until Mrs. Quinn opens her door downstairs. "Mrs. Quinn," I heard her say last week on the landing, "I happened to bake some shortbread." "You happened to bake some shortbread again, Mrs. Quinn." "I happened to." "You always happen to, Mrs. Quinn?" "Well, today I happened to twice." He sleeps in the room at the back of the second floor that used to be a little girl named Dottie's room. In 1971 and 1972 and 1973. There is a yellow rug on the floor again, a small white bookcase by the window, a small gray stuffed elephant on the pillow. On the inside of the bay window in the parlor, above the small framed sepia photograph on the mantel, the 4 letters my son traced in the dust on our first afternoon are gone now. I wiped the glass clean a long time ago. But sometimes, when the late afternoon light comes in low and gold the way it did that first day, and the dust is moving slowly through the air, I see them again, lit faintly from within, the way only memory can light a thing. D-O-T-T. My mother left me a single cardboard box. At the bottom of it was the deed to a 4-story brownstone in Brooklyn she had grown up in, fled from at 22, bought back in secret at 29, and held in trust for me, in a name she had stopped using, for 28 years, while she lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner in Akron, and never said the word Brooklyn out loud once in my entire life. She could not bring herself home. So she sent me, a little late, with my son in my hand and her letter in my pocket, to walk through the door on her behalf. I think about her every single day. If you have ever inherited a home you didn't know you had, subscribe to Mothers Who Inherit. We tell these stories because some doors only open to the daughter who waits long enough to be found. The brass plaque beside the doorbell at 247 Park Slope says, "Van Stone," in clean engraved letters. And at 4 o'clock most afternoons when my son comes home from school, he runs up the 7 worn stone steps in his navy hoodie and his scuffed sneakers, and he reaches up on his toes to ring his own doorbell, and he calls through the leaded glass, "Mom, I'm home." And I open the door, and I let him in, and I am.